Raise your hands if you're a Zionist! Raise your hands if you're a Zionist!
6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust.
Never forget.
If you forget, then it will happen again.
I'm worried for my children and grandchildren. All it takes is a spark. And now I see it happening again. I like to recall the phrase, never again, which is now.
Disturbing, very disturbing surge in anti-Semitic incidents.
A significant increase in anti-Semitic incidents since October 7th.
The highest levels that we've seen in decades.
There have been more than 10,000 anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. since the October 7th attacks.
We've got to commit to fighting anti-Semitism, to do the hard work.
We need NYPD back on this campus.
At ADL, we are fighting back with a full court press.
Not on my campus.
Not on my campus.
I just want to highlight our call website. Any student, family, faculty, or staff member can go to the website to report anti-Semitic discrimination, intimidation, and harassment.
ADL released our campus report card to evaluate how these schools are creating environments that are safe for all Jewish students.
At ADL, you have to try and find solutions.
What we found was quite dramatic. Anti-Semitic rhetoric is having real-world implications on labor markets.
New York City Council member recently announced an Unmask the Hate resolution.
And so we felt like at ADL, we've done a lot of stakeholder advocacy over the years. It's time to get into the shareholder advocacy. We filed in federal court a lawsuit on behalf of Americans who were attacked on 10/7. What we're going to prove is that Iran, North Korea, and Syria were complicit in the Hamas attack.
Samidun, a designated terrorist organization in Israel. Many of these groups and their activities are enabled by tax-exempt 501c3 fiscal sponsors.
I just testified to the Senate Bipartisan Task Force on Combating Anti-Semitism.
We've been working really closely with governors, attorneys general, legislatures to develop anti-Semitism plans.
Anti-Jewish sentiment around the world is at its highest level since the survey began a decade ago.
Social media is a super spreader of anti-Semitism and bigotry of all forms.
White supremacists and right-wing extremists actively use propaganda.
We continuously monitor multiple different platforms to understand what actually is happening.
We can end hate, and we can bring peace to this world.
ADL is an enormous provider of anti-hate education, anti-Semitism education. It's a big piece of what we do in this country to create a better future.
You can't do this work without having hope. How could you not be hopeful when there's a community of people that share your values and want to stop this hate?
With hate, you got to beat it with love. You got to beat it with pride. You got to beat it with strength. And so seeing Jewish people reawaken, reemerge, united and stronger, that's how we'll win.
Please welcome to the stage author, global educator, and founder of the Tel Aviv Institute, Hen Mazzig, and singer, actress, and social media activist, Montana Tucker.
Good morning, New York. How are we doing? Welcome to ADL's Never Is Now Summit. I'm Montana Tucker, and I am so honored to be here with you at this pivotal moment in our fight against anti-Semitism.
Shalom, everyone. I'm Hen Mazzig. It's truly a privilege and pleasure to be here with all of you today. We're gathering at a time of immense challenge. Anti-Semitism is not just an abstract issue. It's a lived reality for Jewish communities, for all of us around the world. And I see it every day in my work through the Tel Aviv Institute, the organization which I founded, and the Jews Talk Justice communities. But what brings us together today in this room is something stronger than hate. It is the unwavering belief that we can and must make a difference.
That's right. And we all have our own way of making that difference. I am the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. I grew up listening to my Zaidi,
and my grandma Lily talk about their experiences for Holocaust remembrances and education. It's their influence that started me on a journey to help educate others, to raise awareness, and to combat hate and anti-Semitism. That's why I started sharing my views and experiences as a Jewish woman with my social media followers, so that over 14 million of you out there are hearing more about our community. It's why I created a docuseries 3 years ago to help teach younger generations about the Holocaust, called How to Never Forget. It's why I showed up at the Grammys in a dress with a big yellow ribbon that said, "Bring them home." And it's why, after the horrors of October 7th, this work feels more essential than ever before.
I think Montana deserves another round of applause. No. Really. The attacks on Israel were not just an assault on innocent people. They were a chilling reminder of how deeply rooted anti-Semitism remains around the world. And since those attacks, the world has shifted in ways that impact us all.
Today, anti-Semitism isn't just rising in isolated incidents. It's growing in broad daylight, online, and in our schools and communities. Kids are afraid to wear their Star of David in public. Families are wondering whether their children are safe going to school. Communities across the globe are seeing hate become normalized again. Every day, Jewish people are facing threats, violence, and discrimination in ways we haven't seen in decades.
But as painful as this time has been for all of us, and it has been painful, we're not letting fear define who we are. We are here today to not just talk about the crisis, but offer solutions and to push forward with actions and with hope. Over the next few days, we will hear from leaders, activists, and experts who are working on the front lines of this fight. We will explore how hate manifests, how we challenge it, and more importantly, how we're going to win. Because we are going to win, absolutely. For over a decade doing this work, researching anti-Semitism, speaking about it through my work, through my social media, through articles, I have always looked at this fight as not just a fight. I'm not fighting anti-Semitism. I'm in the business of ending anti-Semitism. That's what we need to do.
Yes. This summit is called Never is Now for a reason. Because when we say never again, we have to actually mean it. Not tomorrow, not next year, but right now. We can't afford to wait. So I'm asking you all to join us in this moment. I'm asking you to raise up your voice and make some noise. And I'm asking you to be a part of the work that ADL is leading to end hate today.
And to help us lay out the state of this crisis, it's my honor to introduce a leader who has been in the forefront of this battle, ensuring that anti-Semitism is confronted head-on. Please welcome ADL National Director and CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt.
Appreciate you.
You look awesome. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you all for coming here today. It feels as if a lifetime has elapsed since we last convened here 1 year ago. Then, we were reeling from the horrors and the pain of October the 7th and its aftermath. And now, a year later, we find ourselves in a different world. First and foremost, a number of the hostages, thank God, have come home, including many these past few weeks. Like you, nothing made me happier than to see those families hug their loved ones. I could watch those videos all day long. And let me just say, we won't rest until every single one of them, the living and the deceased, are back in Israel. Bring them home now. And another thing that's different, after months of allowing the harassment, intimidation, even violence against Jewish students and faculty, many university presidents, certainly not all, but many have rediscovered the virtue of actually enforcing their policies on encampments and harassment. And now, a new administration has taken office in Washington, D.C., and made it abundantly clear that they will redouble the federal government's efforts to fight anti-Semitism on campus, in K-12 schools, and in international organizations. And you know, regardless of who you voted for, this is something we can all celebrate and support. And as we convene here today, Sinwar and Nasrallah no longer walk this earth. Assad is in exile. And the Islamic Republic of Iran, the world's largest state sponsor of anti-Semitism and terror, is in retreat, and its proxies are hollow shells of what they once were. So maybe, just maybe, we are turning the corner and coming out of one of the darkest periods in Jewish history since the end of World War II. But to think that everything can just go back to normal is a fantasy. We still have right-wing extremists freed from prison, emboldened here in the United States, as well as their compatriots organizing, mobilizing, and gaining traction through political parties in Europe. I mean, beyond our shores, I don't remember a time when diaspora communities faced more uncertainty. We're seeing waves of violence in once safe places like Sydney and Toronto. Synagogues torched, homes defaced, cars vandalized. This is the new norm for Jews in so many liberal democracies. College campuses here at home may not be aflame, but not a single day goes by without ADL getting a call about a student who was harassed or attacked, or about a campus group that wants to glorify Hamas terrorists, or kick Hillel off campus, or force their institution to adopt BDS. And yes, we still have self-described progressives in major nonprofits, professional associations, news outlets, and elected office who see themselves as the parity police, refusing to acknowledge anti-Jewish hate on its own and gaslighting us about what is or isn't anti-Semitic. So suffice to say, all of us at ADL are still very, very busy. That's because no matter where you stand, there is no going back. The ground beneath us has profoundly shifted since 10/7. We are in a new era. One author went so far as to argue that the golden age of American Jewry is over. A distinguished historian recently noted that for the first time since 1948, Jewish Americans are now feeling something our ancestors in Poland or Germany or Tunisia or Iraq or wherever they lived, that they knew far too well. Fear. Fear. Many of us are old enough to remember when our grandparents would lower their voices when talking about Jewish things in public. I remember being told to behave so as not to bring shame on the Jews. Others actually changed their names to something more acceptable. That was done out of fear. And over the years, it's true, these old behaviors faded away. They weren't necessary. They seemed as outdated as the plastic covering the living room couches or rotary phones in the kitchen. But let me ask you, if you're sitting here today, how many of you changed vacation plans in the last year? Maybe decided not to go to Paris or London. Or if you did, you probably took your Star of David necklace off or thought twice before visiting a Jewish site. How many of us have children looking at colleges and find ourselves crossing off the list amazing, world-class universities, places that many of us attended or wish we could have, because of their anti-Semitism? How many of our synagogues and JCCs now have bulletproof glass, metal detectors, and armed security? Let me ask you, do the churches in your town or the YMCAs have to take these precautions? I'm willing to bet not a single one. Or how many of you have changed your account names or know someone who's done so on Uber or DoorDash so they don't sound Jewish? Or maybe removed a mezuzah from their front door? That, my friends, is the return of fear. Check the date. Regardless of what your calendar might say, today is October the 8th. We live in a very different world. Here in the US, the percentage of Americans with significant or elevated anti-Semitic attitudes jumped last year to 24%. That was more than double the 2019 figure and the highest level we've seen since 1964. And for the first time since we started doing these analyses, the younger generation is now notably more anti-Semitic than the older generation. That is an ominous sign if there ever was one. Perhaps unsurprisingly, when you see those attitudes, the number of anti-Jewish incidents also has reached record levels in 4 of the past 5 years. And in the 12-month period after 10/7, ADL tracked more than 10,000 anti-Semitic incidents in America. That's the highest number we've ever seen in any 12-month period since we started tracking this information in the 1970s. Or again, college campuses. More than 83% of Jewish students have witnessed or experienced anti-Semitism since 10/7. 1 in 4 actually have taken extra security measures to protect themselves. Here, in America. So if fear is back, we know why. It's shocking, it's unreal, and it is unacceptable. And so, in the face of this very real fear, we must do better. We cannot keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. As the old saying goes, that is the very definition of insanity. And at ADL, and I would argue other organizations, We must identify what works and what doesn't deliver results. Fix what has fallen short, stop doing what flat out doesn't work, and constantly, relentlessly, ruthlessly innovate. We just can't rest on our laurels. We simply can't keep doing something because it's tradition or because some donor likes it. Hard times force us to make hard choices. And that's exactly what we're doing at ADL. Look, when I stood before you on the stage a year ago, I said we would pivot. I said that a new world requires new strategies and new approaches to fight anti-Semitism. And that's what's happening at ADL. Let me give you some specific examples of our pivot. First, in a world where it's increasingly acceptable to be anti-Semitic, condemnation, folks, condemnation is not enough. Because when there is no moral shame, you just can't scold someone into action. But data doesn't lie. Data is what drives change. So last year, we launched the first ever annual campus report card to document and judge college campuses on how they treat their Jewish community. We developed a rigorous rubric and gave out grades from A's to F's, something these academic institutions definitely understand. We hoped that bad grades would prod these colleges and universities into action, and that eventually everyone would get an A, not because of grade inflation, but because they were able to see how specifically they were failing, and ideally they would want to fix it. And I'm proud that in the past year, since we published the first report card, ADL offices across the country engaged on a sustained basis with 70% of the schools that we rated. We provided concrete recommendations on new policies and gave practical advice to administrators. I myself spoke to dozens of university presidents, one-on-one, giving them counsel and criticism, pushing them to do better. And today, I'm proud to announce that we just released our second annual report card. And I'm delighted to share that a third of the schools we assessed in 2024 improved by 1 letter grade, and 10% actually went up 2 letter grades. You can check it out yourself. Go to adl.org/campus report card to see all the grades, but do it after this session if you don't mind. Seeing how this approach worked, looking at the results we generated, ADL recently launched the Ratings and Assessment Institute to apply this same model of rigorous data-based evaluations to entirely new sectors, such as state governments, public companies, professional associations. We will hold them all accountable. Second example of our pivot, we are going to court. ADL has filed more lawsuits in the past 12 months than we actually did in our first 112 years of existence. These actions include litigation against extremist groups, universities, school districts, corporations, and a landmark $4 billion lawsuit that we filed on behalf of American victims of 10/7 against Iran for the Islamic Republic's role in facilitating the attack. And let me tell you, we are going to win. And we also realized in doing this work that it was too difficult for people to get the legal help they needed when they were in trouble. So we partnered with our friends at the Brandeis Institute, Hillel International, the law firm Gibson Dunn, and numerous other white shoe law firms to create and set up CALL, a first-of-its-kind legal hotline for students and staff at colleges and universities who have been victimized for anti-Semitism, but previously didn't know where to go. In less than 18 months, the CALL system has handled more than 800 Title VI complaints. And I'm happy to report that based on its success, we've begun to expand CALL to handle cases of discrimination against students and parents and teachers in K-12 school districts where the issues also are rampant and virtually unmonitored. Third example of our pivot, we are moving upstream to interrupt anti-Semitism before it even happens. The ADL Center on Anti-Semitism Research quietly has matured into a world-class center of excellence in social science, conducting a wide range of research, from highly targeted focus groups to large-scale surveys to randomized controlled trials, all focused on practical issues such as how we improve the efficacy of our programs or how we interrupt and intercept intolerance before it takes root. Their insights now inform everything we do at ADL, from our Instagram feed to our educational curricula. Fourth example of our pivot, we are finding new ways to harness our power. Many companies are now targeted by BDS campaigns that seek to demonize Israel and create hostile workplaces for Jewish employees. Last year alone, 75% of the Fortune 500 were targeted by BDS campaigns. That's why JLens, a subsidiary of ADL, launched the first ever Jewish Exchange Traded Fund, or ETF, just last week. It started trading this past Thursday. On the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol TOV, T-O-V, the Hebrew word for good. It's the first Jewish ETF in the world. And beyond the financial benefits, TOV will unlock the latent power of shareholder advocacy in a way that the Jewish community has never tapped before. So when the BDS hooligans try to schedule a die-in at a shareholders meeting or propose some preposterous resolution to force a company to divest from Israel, TOV gives us a seat at the table so we can punch back. And believe me, we will. Finally, ADL doesn't just innovate in a lab. We show up and step right into the ring. Hours after the horrific pogrom against Israeli soccer fans in Amsterdam last year, I was there, on the ground, in the city, having a one-on-one with the Dutch Prime Minister in his residence, telling him that he must take action to protect his Jewish citizens. You see, showing up is what ADL does, day in and day out in your cities and towns, across America and around the world. Take what happened last summer when the ADL Center on Extremism learned that there would be far-right extremist demonstrations in Nashville, Tennessee. Our Atlanta office took that intel alerted local law enforcement and elected leaders in Nashville that these groups plan to march and disturb city council meetings, we gave them the details. We shared with them the specifics so they could stop it from happening, and we helped them prepare for any eventuality. But we didn't stop there. We also provided model ordinances to the Nashville City Council that would help the city combat these groups. And guess what happened? The City Council passed the new laws, and now Nashville is a safer and more inclusive city using the ADL model legislation. Or look what happened in Chicago, Illinois, just last year. A group of anti-Israel therapists took it upon themselves to compile a Facebook list of so-called Zionists, targeting mental health professionals simply for the offense of being Jewish or supporting the Jewish state. They openly threatened their livelihoods and reputations. This wasn't just an attack on individuals. It was an attack on the integrity of an entire profession, and we were not going to let that stand. ADL's incident response team leapt into action. They worked with our Center for Technology and Society. We pressed Meta to get the group removed from the platform for violating its policies around doxing. But this wasn't just about shutting down a single Facebook page. It was about real accountability. So we engaged directly with Illinois state regulators, pushing them to sanction the therapists behind the page who initiated the campaign, including stripping them of their licenses. We're tracking the outcome closely, but a message has been sent and delivered, and now others will think twice before they target the Jewish community. You see, this is what ADL does. Sometimes out in front, sometimes behind the scenes, but always, always, always being true to our core purpose, to protect the Jewish people. And just look at some of last year's numbers, our scoreboard, if you will. ADL analysts provided more than 2,700 assists to law enforcement, giving them actionable intelligence that helped police prevent hate crimes and protect endangered communities. ADL's Synagogues in Action program reached more than 150,000 households through more than 450 synagogues in 45 states, plus DC and Canada. And ADL's educational materials reached more than 5 million school children across America. Now I know, and I appreciate, that a lot of attention gets paid to our statements, and that many of you might not agree with every position we take or item that we post. And you know, that's just fine. Because we don't just tweet about bigots, we take them on and take their bigotry apart piece by piece. And so I know, I feel the fear that's out there. We all wish we could turn back the clock to October the 6th. But when I think about this past year, yes, there is fear, but there is also hope. Hope in the ordinary Americans who know it's wrong to vandalize synagogues and to harass their Jewish neighbors. Hope in the silenced majority, many of whom have never even met a Jew, but they know it's wrong to attack students on campus or seniors walking to worship. And so I know there is hope. And while we're inspired by this hope, I'll also acknowledge that hope is not a strategy. That's why we at ADL will never cede a single inch to anti-Semites. We will never stop finding new ways to prevent bigotry and stop the bigots in their tracks. And we will never relent and never apologize for fighting for our community with everything we've got, for fighting for our kids, for fighting for our future. Again, we will never apologize because never is now. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Am Yisrael Chai.
The video. Okay, I'll come back. It's okay, yep.
Now, some of you may know the story of Omer Neutra. And even if you don't, his is a familiar one. Omer grew up right here in the New York area. He attended Jewish day school. He was active in his synagogue youth movement. He spent his summers at Camp Ramah. He captained his high school volleyball and basketball teams. Omer was like so many of our kids. Omer was like one of my kids. But when it came time to college, he said, wait. He said, wait. Omer said, I want to serve my people. I want to protect the Jewish state. And so Omer bravely enlisted in the IDF as a lone soldier. On October the 7th, Omer was serving as a tank commander, one of the first to respond to the Hamas attack. Omer went missing that day, taken by Hamas into Gaza. And sadly, tragically, at the end of last year, the IDF obtained enough evidence to conclude that despite the disgusting efforts of Hamas to conceal their heinous act, Omer had been killed in battle on that dark day. Now we fight to get his body back and give him the dignified burial that he deserves. Let's watch a video about Omer. Let his memory be both a blessing and a revolution. And then let's welcome to our stage today, to open the 2025 Never Is Now conference, Omer's remarkable, intrepid, and inspiring parents, Ronen and Orna Neutra.
We had an opportunity to come to the United States, and little did we know that we're going to start a business, we're going to have our children born here.
We embarked on our journey with our new family, which is the Schechter family.
He was the captain of the soccer team, then he was the captain of the volleyball team, then a captain of the basketball team.
He started off at the Mid-Island YJCC, then he went 2 years in Sprout Lake, then USY Wheels, then JNF Roots in Israel, and then he was a staff at Ramah Nayak. He's a person that brings people together, and he does it out of the good of his heart. He went through the process of applying to colleges. He was accepted to a few places. He committed to going to Binghamton. We felt that it would be a good idea to take a gap year. And so he joined a program, it's called Mechina, for Israeli kids before they joined the army.
Slowly started to build some internal conflict. Am I going back to university or am I drafting?
And he made his decision.
You don't draft an army mainly because of a culture. You volunteer because you believe it's the right thing to do, and that's what he believes.
Every time he could, he called home, and he put a lot of effort into maintaining it.
He was stationed with his team on the Gaza border. There was a lot of activity generated by the Hamas on the fence. They were throwing all kind of small bombs. They've been in the tanks working 18 hours a day. The night of October 6th, he calls and he speaks with Orna.
Omer was fairly relaxed. He said that it had been quiet on the border.
I'm checking my phone just before going to sleep. I'm starting to read reports on ground attack. So immediately I'm like texting Omer, what's going on? Talk to me. Are you okay? But we never got an answer.
A few hours later, what I'm hearing from high command, most likely he was kidnapped by Hamas.
That's the last we know about Omer. We don't know his condition. We don't know if he was hurt.
No matter what your political opinion is, why is it so difficult to see that there's a humane crisis here? This is my child. He's an American citizen. He was born here. He grew up here. Bring Omer home. Bring all the hostages home now.
Please welcome the parents of Israeli-American Captain Omer Neutra of blessed memory, still held hostage by Hamas, Orna and Ronen Neutra, and CNN anchor and senior global affairs analyst, Bianna Golodryga.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Bianna Golodryga. It is an honor to be with all of you here today at the ADL Never Is Now two-day conference. For all of us here and for so many around the world, October 7th changed our lives. It changed our purpose here in our jobs, our roles as journalists, as parents, as Jews. And Ronen and Orna, I've spent so many months now with families of hostages, and this is the first time that we meet. And it is an honor to be with you. I want to learn from you and for you to tell our audience here a bit more about Omer, because you waited for over 430 days to find out finally whether your son was alive or whether he had been killed on October 7th. Tragically, you found out that he was no longer alive and his body is now among those held in Gaza. Can you tell us about Omer's relationship with Judaism and with Israel?
So, Jonathan in the movie shows a deep connection. As Israeli Americans, when we moved here and began raising our children, we realized that we needed partners in the community to raise our kids with Jewish pride. And we joined together with the local synagogue, Midway Jewish Center, the Sheikh School of Long Island. Our kids went to Jewish camp, and all of these together, instilled a really deep connection. Of course, we're also Israeli. We spoke Hebrew at home. We have a very big family in Israel. Both of our fathers were Holocaust survivors. Omer grew up on the ethos of, a strong Israel for the Jewish people is necessary. And he really absorbed all of it. And he loved Israel, he loved visiting Israel. And we on the one hand, we saw it in him, you know, and that's also why we encouraged him to go on that gap year. We saw his Israeliness. But on the other hand, we didn't know with what passion he loved Israel until all of this happened, and I started looking back, and people started sending me things that Omer said in different leadership roles that he took upon himself with USY, his youth group. He spoke about Israel. He said, let me talk about my favorite girl, Israel, you know, with a passion like his girlfriend. And I think for him to land there and to actually feel it and to meet Israeli kids, that was the first time he was on a program with Israeli kids, was really to reveal something in himself that he didn't know was so strong and powerful.
On October 7th, Ronan, you described that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, serving as an IDF tank commander. Last week, the Nassau County legislators unanimously voted to change a stretch of Manitou Hill Road in Plainview to Captain Omer Neutra Way. And the county executive said in an interview about Omer, he called him a hero and went on to say, people should know about his courage. People who drive by that road are going to see Omer Neutra's name up there, and they're going to be curious, and they're going to Google his name, and they're going to find out his heroic acts. Can you talk about the compassion and the community here in New York, especially in Long Island, because you played a unique role of being both Israeli and American, and you talked to me on the phone a bit about how emotional and heartwarming it has been for you to see this community really rally around you.
Without a doubt, I think if there's one silver lining for us was to see the reaction of the community. The fact that just after October 7, while everybody were in shock, there was an organization to try and see how can we help. We got food deliveries, and we're actually getting still today, 514 days later, we're getting food deliveries to our home just by the neighboring community, just trying to see how can we help, what can we do for you. That's big. The community also leaders reached out, what can we do for you? Our congressperson, the whole surrounding, and of course our religious leader, Rabbi Levinson, who was incredible in putting together a whole response of the community. And it's all, a small silver lining, but it's major for us, of course, and that street naming is just a culmination, and we don't take it for granted. It's a real heartwarming element in this hardship that we're going through, and it's going to be bitter, sad, and sweet to see Omer's name when we pass there for generations to come.
I just want to say that from the first week of the war, there has been a group that has been marching in Plainview, which is our hometown, every single week, every Sunday, as part of a chapter of Run for Their Lives, advocating for the release of the hostages, and they have not wavered, not even in the snow or in the rain. They're always there. And for us, we travel so much in our advocacy, and it gives us a lot of comfort and support and strength to know that they are there, and wherever we are home, we can just plug in and connect. And I think when we received the horrible news about Omer being killed, which was on December 1st, and we decided that we were going to sit Shiva, at least part of the Shiva in New York, the outpour of support and just came, everything just came crashing into the Shiva. There were thousands of people that came to comfort us and share their condolences. And I think really at that point we felt how Omer was no longer just our child. He became almost like the face of the hostages for the New York and surrounding community. And the tragedy of October 7th. You know, people walked in and they said, we're here to bear witness, 3 generations, people that we did not know before, that, you know, they just had to share this moment. And it was truly unbelievable.
It's so important to hear that because we spend so much time, and rightly so, talking about the hideous marches filled with anti-Semitic bile that we've seen around the world. But to know that there are communities that have been marching in solidarity with you and the hostages and all the innocent lives lost is very, very comforting. I should note that the county executive also said that just because Omer is not going to be coming home alive, it didn't stop you, his parents, from continuing the fight to get the hostages back. So you are truly an extraordinary family, rightly said. And this comes as a critical time because, as we know, over the weekend, the extension of phase 1 did not happen, the one endorsed by both Prime Minister Netanyahu and Trump's emissary to the region, Steve Witkoff. Hamas had rejected the extension. Now, Israel has announced that it's halting aid into Gaza, and there is a lot of concern about what that means for the 59 confirmed hostages, both alive and deceased, that currently remain in Gaza. We know that Idan, or Eli Sharabi, excuse me, and other hostages, former hostages, are coming to meet with the president tomorrow at the White House. What is your message to the audience here and to the president? And you've worked with both administrations, really navigating beautifully, putting politics aside and keeping the focus on the hostages, on your son. What is your message to the people here?
So I think what we understood from day one is the fact that we live here, the fact that our son is involved in this crisis. We have a role. And our family was saying, "Where are you coming to Israel because of, you know, what happened?" And we said, "No, we actually have to stay." And what we started to do was reach out to anybody we knew, anybody we could get. And actually, a day later, a letter from us was already in the hands of, at the time, Secretary Blinken and our senator, Senator Schumer, basically telling them that there is a crisis in the Middle East with the hostages, some of them Americans, and very quickly the Forum of the Hostages was formed as a very important center of assistance to our family, to all the hostage families, and we're very much appreciating it, both in Israel, a major organization, but also here in New York and in DC, volunteers that are incredible. And we understood that we have a role here to speak up and be in front of the administration. I have to say that President Biden and his administration opened doors for us, and we probably been in the White House 20 sometimes during the first administration. And then we saw obviously the election and the election cycle and the effect. And then the Trump effect, what happened just as he was elected, and we were one of the forces trying to make sure that the incoming administration is going to work with the outgoing administration sooner rather than later. So they really came together, and Steve Witkoff was selected to lead this effort early, just as the elections were over. And ever since, we've seen that hostages started to come out. And stage 1 has been completed. But we are in a very sensitive time, like you said. We need to move to stage 2. We need to make sure that all the hostages are coming out. We have 24 living hostages, and we have 35 deceased hostages, and among them our son. And, you know, it really disturbs us when we hear that there are only 24 hostages out there. No, there are 59 hostages, and each one of them must be reunited with their family. So Having said that, we also have very good access today to the Trump administration, to people in his administration, and we are making sure that this process keeps on moving with what you just mentioned, the 6 returning hostages that are going to be meeting tomorrow with the administration, telling their stories, and making sure that the urgency is in front of everybody. Just hearing the horrible stories of their being captured and the torture and the starvation that they had to suffer, and we're hoping it's going to make the influence that it should to make a move now, get them all out now.
I think what we've learned, we didn't learn it. I think our son embodied it in his own actions, the responsibility for us as being one big family, the Jewish people, and not leaving anyone behind. He embodied that in his own act of moving to Israel and joining the IDF. And I think for anyone who is concerned about Israelis' resiliency or national security, the issue of the hostages is at the core. This is a raw wound. No one can move on. This goes way beyond just the direct families of the hostages. As you all know, any 18-year-old is required to serve in the IDF. How do you send your kids knowing that the country won't do everything to save them if, God forbid, things like this would occur? And before anything else, we need to bring them all back home, and anything else can come after that.
100%. And we have young men left behind and soldiers just like our son. And the responsibility of the Israeli government is to do everything in its power to get them all out. And we are here making sure that the American administration works with the mediators in the area, whether it's Qatar, Egypt, Turkey, and doing everything possible to bridge these gaps and bring all the hostages home. Yes, we gotta terminate Hamas, for sure. But first, let's bring our people back and then deal with Hamas.
And a reminder that among the 59 hostages that are remaining, both alive and deceased, there are Americans as well. This is an American story, it's an Israeli story, it's a human story, it's a Jewish story. And I have to say over and over throughout my times going back and forth to Israel since October 7th, every single time you speak to people from different political backgrounds, and they all say one thing: this country cannot heal until everyone is home.
Absolutely.
All of the hostages are home, and all of the polling within Israel supports that as well.
That's right.
And before we conclude, Ronan, I do want to ask you something about what is on the minds of many Israelis as well, and that is understanding why October 7th happened, why the worst attack on Israeli soil since its founding happened. And that requires an inquiry, right? And
100%.
You are a big supporter of that. This current administration in Israel keeps on delaying that, but can you talk about why that is so crucial to you when it comes to closure, when it comes to the families who are seeing their own soldiers and their own sons now going to serve? For any Israeli that wants to feel secure that October 7th will never happen again, why a commission of inquiry is important to you?
Well, as the army starts to investigate itself, it's clear that there was some misconception in Israel about what Hamas' role is and how Hamas was treated, and the money that was funneled from Qatar to Hamas, with the administration in Israel agreeing to it. So without a doubt, we got to go to the root cause. Why did we do it? What was the reason for the misconception? Of course, what do we need to do inside the IDF to improve, to change, to make sure it never happens again? But we also have to combine the political aspect and understand years of misconception, what led to it, what was the root cause, and how do we fix it. And that can only be done by a thorough investigation. And we can't push it anymore. We are 1.5 years after the war. When are we going to do it? 10 years later? After the war started, let's say.
I want to take us back to October 6, 2023. It was Sukkot. It was 50 years post the Yom Kippur War. My parents from Israel were visiting with us, and my mom came off the plane with the holiday newspapers from Israel. Have the lessons been learned? Are we prepared? So how can you really make sure this doesn't happen again if you don't even investigate? It's just unfathomable to me that it's not happening yet.
And that's not a political statement.
No, it's not a political statement.
It's important to note. I want to thank you for everything you've done. You know, as journalists, it's very difficult at times to reach out to families because you don't want to hurt them anymore. You don't want to feel like you're trying to exploit them at all. But I think hearing from these hostages that have come back to say that they have been uplifted, that they got reassurances when they had access to television at times, their families fighting for them. I hope that gives you some comfort too, that you helped so many of these hostages, and never again should we have a situation where someone like Eli Sharabi is talking about the hunger, the pain, the torture that he endured. So I do want to, again, thank you for everything that you're doing. We hope that your son, as well as all of the other hostages, come back home, that you get the closure you deserve. And thank you for being heroes yourself.
Thank you, and thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ronen and Orna, for telling your story and for your incredible bravery. Stories like yours are not only unimaginably heartbreaking, they're also shared by far too many people across Israel. Over the last few years, I've been back and forth to Israel 5 times, speaking with people who were forever changed by these attacks. I've talked with survivors of the kibbutzim and of the Nova Music Festival. I've met with many released hostages and hostage families. And I've had conversations with children whose lives will never be the same. Recently, I brought some of those stories together in a documentary called The Children of October 7th, about the kids who were taken by terrorists, who saw their homes destroyed, and who saw their loved ones murdered right in front of them. I'm very thankful and grateful to announce that it is going to be coming out on a big streamer on April 23rd, which is Yom HaShoah, and I'll be making that big announcement soon. Thank you. Please take a look at one of the clips from the documentary.
כשנכנסתי לעזה, ראיתי הרבה אנשים וכזה הרביצו וזה. התחלנו לשמוע יריות וצעקות בערבית, והם חיכו לנו.
Who was hitting you? Were they just normal citizens in Gaza? Were they Hamas? Do you know who they were?
אזרחים.
They were civilians.
לא התחבאנו, אבל פשוט עשינו את עצמנו מתות. לא הצלחנו לסגור את הדלת של הממ"ד, ואז אבא הלך לשמור, ואז בסוף ירו בו.
וואו.
הצליחו לפרוץ לנו לממ"ד. רצו להרוג אותנו, אז הלכנו, אז היינו צריכים ללכת איתם. ולקחו אותנו, לא היה מקום באופנוע אחד. אז איתן היה עם עוד מחבל, ואז נסענו לעזה.
Did they tell you what was happening in Israel?
כן, הם הראו לי סרטים וזה, שהם הורגים אנשים. הם היו שמחים, האמת.
And did you try to look away?
לא, כי במילא לא היה נותן לי. גם ראיתי דברים יותר רעים, גם ראיתי באמיתי, בעולם האמיתי.
בגלל שהוא נסע ממש מהר, אז המנוע כבר לא היה טוב, ואז האופנוע שלנו נפל, ושליטן המשיך להתקדם, ואנחנו הצלחנו לברוח. הלכנו 4 שעות, יחפות.
You walked barefoot with no shoes on for 4 hours?
כן, והיה מלא קוצים. ואז חיפשנו מים כי היינו טמאות, ולא מצאנו. הלכנו ואז ראינו עוד 2 מחבלים, אז עשינו את עצמנו מתות.
Do you think your mom was scared?
כן, ראיתי אותה בוכה.
Do you think seeing her scared helped you be stronger?
לא, ההפך. אני חשבתי שזה חלום.
And when you and your mom and your sister finally escaped, what were you thinking about Eitan and your dad knowing that they were in Gaza?
לא ידעתי שאבא בעזה, אז חשבתי שהוא מת. כי הוא היה פצוע ממש ממש קשה, גם ביד וגם ברגל, והוא לא יכל לזוז.
Do you sleep well at night?
לא הרבה, האמת. כאילו, עברתי את הכי גרוע וזהו.
If you could say one thing to him right now, what would you say?
שאנחנו בסדר ושאני אוהבת אותו.
Do you miss him?
כן.
ADL is committed to telling these stories, but they're also working to hold the perpetrators of these crimes accountable. And not just the individuals who committed these atrocities, but the nations and organizations that have supported their campaign of terror. To tell us more, please welcome partner at Crowell & Mooring LLP, Aryeh Portney.
On October 7th, 2003, Hamas-led terrorists from Gaza invaded Israel and committed a massacre of innocent victims. The terrorists murdered more than 1,200 people in cold blood, kidnapped more than 250, and tortured countless others as they ravaged and destroyed Jewish communities across southern Israel. Even amid stories of incredible bravery and heroism by Israelis who risked their lives to save others, the attack has seared into the minds of the Jewish community images of depravity and devastation. Families have been shattered. Survivors have indelible and permanent scars. There is no end to the need for help. As we think of ways to alleviate even a small measure of the suffering the evil terrorists and their puppeteers caused on October 7th, first thoughts are charity, advocacy, and volunteerism. Those are all essential. What might not be as readily apparent is an additional avenue to justice through legal action, and for American victims and their families in the U.S. courts. Last July, ADL and my firm, Crowell & Mooring, filed a lawsuit in federal district court in Washington, D.C. on behalf of 180 October 7th victims and family members against Iran, Syria, and North Korea using a U.S. law that allows suits against states designated by the U.S. government as state sponsors of terrorism who provide material support for terrorist attacks that kill or injure Americans or their loved ones around the world. Through this case, every one of those individuals will have the opportunity to tell their truth in a U.S. court and to pursue justice against those responsible for their incalculable loss and suffering. This groundbreaking litigation will provide a path for justice, accountability, and redress. It will also allow the victims of these horrifying crimes to establish a true historical account of October 7th and to expose the people, organizations, and nations responsible. No one should be able to commit crimes like these and hide from accountability. Through our work and with ADL's partnership, we are determined to stand with the victims of this monstrous crime and bring the perpetrators to justice. Please take a look.
My mom, Adrian, she was born and raised in California, and then early 80s, she met my dad. She was a musician. She was already playing in an orchestra, moving over to Israel and made a career path change and became a nurse and a midwife, where she delivered a lot of babies. So Bedouins, some people even coming from Gaza or from Hebron. I got a message that there was another alarm going on in the kibbutz, so I gave my mom a call, and my two other siblings were on the line with her when they heard the terrorists barged into the house, and then the call ended. Wednesday night, we got the notification from the Israeli authorities that my mom was confirmed dead and murdered.
The relatives of dozens of victims killed in the October 7th attacks in Israel launching a landmark lawsuit.
And what we're going to prove is that Iran, North Korea, and Syria were complicit in the Hamas attack because they provided material resources, financing, or actually training to the terror organization.
For us as a family, we wanted to do something about it, right? Not just sit back and take things how they were, and we felt like this is a good opportunity for us to take action and try to have some kind of justice for my mom and for other victims of this terrible tragedy of October 7th.
Since 10/7, there have been people who did not show up for our community. The allies who simply went missing when it actually mattered. And then there have been those who absolutely did show up and who met the moment. Our next speaker is one of those very people. Now, you may remember her from that eye-opening hearing at the House Education and Workforce Committee just weeks after 10/7, facing down the presidents of Penn, Harvard, and MIT. She grilled these leaders. And interrogated them in the public interest, because not one of these individuals was willing to state unambiguously that it's wrong to call for the genocide of the Jewish people on their campuses. Because of the spotlight she helped to shine on these institutions, two of those university presidents subsequently resigned. You also may remember our next speaker for another hearing in which she probed the bewildering ambiguity of the president of my alma mater, Northwestern University, in the face of indisputable anti-Semitism on that campus. She waved a copy of ADL's campus anti-Semitism report card, asking how an F was acceptable for one of the most prestigious universities in America. In both cases, Congress worked closely with ADL and with her and her team specifically, behind the scenes, sharing information, alerting them to problems, and doing what we could do together to beat back anti-Semitism. And let me tell you, from personal experience, she may have been one of the busiest people on Capitol Hill, but she answers every text, she replies to every email, and she takes every call and always listens with an open mind. And once confirmed by the US Senate, she will take that commitment and tenacity to the United Nations, a place with a long history of anti-Israel bias and anti-Semitism. This woman, she is fearless, she is ferocious, she is a fighter, and she is a friend to our community. She is exactly what we need to bring some common sense to a UN system that seems to specialize in nonsense. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to welcome to our stage here at Never Is Now the U.S. representative for New York's 21st Congressional District, the former fourth-ranking Republican in the U.S. House of Representatives, and our next U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First, thank you to ADL for your tremendous leadership on combating anti-Semitism. And a special thanks to Jonathan Greenblatt for the invitation to speak today and for your work with Congress on this critical issue. Never again is now. That is the reason we are all here today, to ensure that these words are actually acted upon. On October 7th, and in the 513 days since, we have seen anti-Semitic atrocities that we never thought would happen in our lifetimes, both at home and abroad. The worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, and the open celebration of those heinous acts of terrorism in our streets and on our college campuses. Enough is enough. From capitals to campuses, we have watched too many with the power to act do nothing. But there is hope. In the famous words of Holocaust survivor and Jewish advocate Simon Wiesenthal, who dedicated his life to ensuring the horrors of the Holocaust are never forgotten, he said, "For evil to flourish, it only requires good men to do nothing." Under President Trump, America refuses to do nothing. I, as a leader in the United States Congress and the next U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, refuse to do nothing. You see, for me, Israel and the Jewish people hold a very special place in my heart, which has fueled my deep dedication and my deep-held commitment to ensuring the evils of anti-Semitism are extinguished. As a young girl from upstate New York, I grew up with many Jewish friends. I attended many bar and bat mitzvahs. I've joined many families over the years for Shabbat dinners. As a Harvard student, I went with college friends to events at Harvard Hillel and have celebrated Britot for friends' sons and signed the ketubah at a friend's wedding. Throughout my life, the importance of the state of Israel was clear. a shining beacon of freedom and civilization in the Middle East, and intrinsically entwined with the success of America. And I've had the privilege to visit Israel many times throughout my life, both before and during my time in Congress. And each and every time, I have been truly moved by Israel and her spirit. And today, it is more important than ever that the United States of America shows moral leadership and stands with Israel and the Jewish people. Under President Trump, there will be no daylight when it comes to the United States' support for Israel. There is a reason that Prime Minister Netanyahu calls him, quote, the best friend that Israel has ever had. We know here today the horrors of October 7th changed everything. It made crystal clear that this fight is not just Israel's fight alone, but the West's fight, a fight against the evil of Hamas, a war between good and evil, civilization and barbarity. We will not and must not rest until every single hostage is returned home and Hamas terrorists are eradicated from the face of the earth. And we must remind ourselves what happened in our own country after this horrific day. In the aftermath of the bloodiest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust and the days since, we saw our, quote, most elite universities utterly fail their Jewish students. The world saw, in what is now the most viewed congressional testimony in history, with over 1 billion views, we saw the moral rot of America's higher education. And I want to take you directly into that committee room. After seeing the skyrocketing rise in anti-Semitism, including at my own college, alma mater, I encouraged the Education and Workforce Committee Chairwoman, Virginia Fox, that we needed to hold a hearing with university presidents of MIT, Penn, and Harvard to hold them accountable. As the first member of my immediate family to have the opportunity to graduate from college, it was a real privilege for me to have the opportunity to attend Harvard. And it has never been perfect, but when I attended, I could have never imagined what the campus would turn into or tolerate nearly 20 years later. So we held the hearing with the university presidents to demand answers and accountability. But instead, we were met with weak and morally bankrupt university leaders who evaded our questions and refused to answer direct questions with direct answers. And that question, it was only in the final moments that the clip that went viral happened. The media and the majority of the attendees had largely left the hearing when I decided to ask an incredibly simple question. And it was not a political question. It was a moral one. And it was actually not one of my prepared questions, but one that I had written down in pencil probably 5 minutes before because I thought it would force them to answer correctly. And that simple moral question was this: does calling for the genocide of Jews violate your university's code of conduct? And one after the other said, quote, it depends on the context. And the world heard. At the time, I had no idea the earthquake that questioning would set off in American higher education. It was truly the question and horrific answer heard around the world. And the reality is that everyday Americans, like my wonderful constituents, they know without hesitation that the answer to that question is an easy one. It is yes, and it certainly does not depend on the context. In a matter of weeks and months and additional hearings, university presidents from Harvard, Penn, Columbia, and more were forced to resign, 5 down and so many to go. And now here we are today. Just look at the actions of Barnard College so-called leadership last week, on the same day that the world was mourning the murders of the Bebas babies by Hamas terrorists, pro-Hamas terrorist sympathizers took over Barnard College campus building, spewing anti-Semitic and anti-Israel hate, assaulting a staff member and sending him to the hospital. Meanwhile, Barnard's so-called leadership held off on calling in the law enforcement stationed outside, instead offering up a meeting with the college president to negotiate. This is not leadership. As Jewish students at Barnard and colleges and universities around the nation fear for their lives and safety, college leaders continue to pander to the pro-Hamas demands. To the Jewish students listening and here today, do not relent or give in. America and the force of the Trump administration are behind you, and we will not stop fighting. President Trump has made clear the importance of this issue. In his first month in office, he signed a historic executive order to combat anti-Semitism on our campuses and streets using every tool the government has. Any foreign student participating in these anti-Semitic acts must be stripped of their visas and immediately deported. President Trump's administration has also already initiated civil rights investigations of these hotbeds of campus anti-Semitism, including at Columbia and Northwestern. And I know the incoming Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, Attorney General Pam Bondi, and their teams, including Leo Terrell, will hold these universities accountable for their failures. And the ADL's work helping expose the rot on higher ed campuses has been invaluable to these efforts. And I am honored to join President Trump in this fight, earning his nomination to serve in his cabinet as the next U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. We know the United Nations is indeed a deep den of anti-Semitism, infected with the same rampant anti-Israel and anti-American hate and moral rot that has polluted America's higher education system. Especially since the barbaric Hamas attacks of October 7th, the UN has continuously betrayed Israel, betraying America in the process, acting instead as an apologist for Iran and Iran's terrorist proxies. Under President Trump, as United States Ambassador to the United Nations, the days of propping up organizations that run counter to our interest are long gone. We will no longer fund terrorism, anti-Semitism, and anti-Israel hate. That stops immediately. And I am so proud that President Trump has the strongest record of any American president when it comes to standing with Israel. From moving the U.S. Embassy to its rightful place, Israel's eternal capital of Jerusalem, to negotiating the historic Abraham Accords, the greatest stride towards peace normalization in more than a quarter century, to aligning U.S. Central Command with Israel, a change that fostered daily communications with the IDF, joint exercises, and crucial coordination with British and Arab partners that helped defend against the unprecedented Iranian attacks against Israel last year. And I believe it's quite obvious to the world that if President Trump had remained in office, October 7th would never have happened. He has brought his pro-Israel policies to the White House, and in just a month, the world has watched as President Trump reasserts America First, peace through strength foreign policy. Only 12 hours after his re-election, Hamas terrorists called for an immediate end to the war, a direct result of President Trump's restoration of American strength to the world stage. Innocent hostages taken by Hamas terrorists have been returned home. As President Trump promised, all hell if they were not brought back. And we will continue to work until every hostage comes back home and is returned home. Importantly, we restored maximum pressure on Iran and imposed sanctions on the illegitimate International Criminal Court, which is targeting Israel with anti-Semitic attacks. And at the United Nations, we took the decisive action to defund UNRWA, the pro-Hamas terrorist front group who committed atrocities on October 7th. And I can promise you this, that as the United States ambassador to the United Nations, we are not only going to defund UNRWA, we must totally dismantle it. And as we approach the 50th anniversary of Ambassador Moynihan's historic opposition to the United Nations' disgraceful Zionism is Racism resolution, the time has come to bring about needed change. We must redirect the course of history away from the anti-Semitism and the anti-Israel bias that Ambassador Moynihan described as, quote, a great evil that has been loosed upon the world. Let me be clear. Everyday Americans understand the need to support Israel's fight, and that the same pro-Hamas terrorist sympathizers who chant death to Israel also chant death to America. These terrorists want to topple Israel, topple the U.S., and we must never yield. Never again is right now. Under President Trump, America will always stand up for the Jewish people, both at home and abroad. Israel has our unequivocal support, and we will not rest until every single hostage is brought home and the Hamas terrorists are eradicated. And together, we must remind the world about the moral imperative of standing with the Jewish people, Israel, and together we will combat the evils of anti-Semitism. We will win this fight for the Jewish people. We will win this fight to save America and stand up for our moral values. We will win this fight for our most precious ally, Israel, and we must win this fight for all of Western civilization and humanity. And my message for Turtle Bay is this: hear me clearly, right here and now. The anti-Semites at the United Nations better buckle up, because I'm coming. The university presidents were just a warm-up, and believe me, anyone who knows me knows that I'm just getting started. God bless you. Thank you so much to the ADL. God bless Israel, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Please welcome ADL's Senior Vice President for International Affairs, Ambassador Marina Rosenberg.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks to Congresswoman Stefanik for her words and her support, and thanks to all of you for being here with us today. As we all know, since October 7th, we have experienced a surge in anti-Semitism, not just here in the US, but around the world. In addition to the spikes in attacks on Jews and Jewish institutions, we are also contending with the global rise in the number of people harboring anti-Semitic sentiments. This is evidence from the findings of ADL's 2024 Global 100 survey, released in January, which examined anti-Semitic attitudes in 103 countries and territories around the world. The results are quite shocking. The survey found that 46% of the world's adult population, an estimated 2.2 billion people, harbor deeply entrenched anti-Semitic attitudes. This is more than double compared to ADL's first worldwide survey a decade ago, and the highest level on record since ADL started tracking these trends globally. In some spaces, anti-Semitism has become normalized and excused, spreading its poisonous tentacles across the globe. No Jewish community has been immune from this phenomenon. From Australia to Chile, from Canada to the UK, and from South Africa to the US, our communities are facing an onslaught of hate, unprecedented in our lifetimes. One of the main tools ADL employs to combat anti-Semitism is education. This includes ADL's cornerstone Words to Action program, which provides tools for Jewish youth to understand and effectively address anti-Semitism, anti-Israel bias, stereotypes, prejudice, and hate speech. During 2024, across Latin America and Europe, ADL trained around 3,000 Jewish youth and adults across 21 countries. We have also leaned heavily into our advocacy work, lobbying governments to issue national strategies to combat anti-Semitism and calling for the widespread adoption of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, as well as the adoption and implementation of the global guidelines for combating anti-Semitism. But ADL cannot do this work alone. I want to recognize the nearly 300 international participants who are in attendance here today at Never Is Now, including dozens of Jewish communities leaders from around the world and members of the J7 task force representing the 7 largest Jewish communities outside of Israel, which ADL co-founded. We are so fortunate to work in close partnership with your communities, to support one another in difficult moments, and to share best practices on how to effectively combat all forms of hate. Thank you all for being here with us today. I also want to recognize special envoys to combat anti-Semitism that have traveled from different regions and the many diplomats in attendance. We are grateful for your presence and hope today's conference helps illuminate for you and for your government the many challenges facing Jewish communities around the world. In these difficult and dark moments, it is important to focus on points of light, which lend us much-needed hope and strength. Since October 7th, the bonds of global Jewish community have tightened, and our connection to Israel and Israeli people have grown closer. Perhaps more than anything, it has been heartwarming to observe the resilience of Israeli people in the face of numerous daunting threats and challenges, including the hostages, the war in Gaza, attacks from Iran and its regional proxies, and international hostility. Despite all of this, the people of Israel remain strongly committed to the security and overall well-being of the Jewish state. I now want to call your attention to the screens behind me for a short video presentation highlighting the resiliency, hope, and strength of Israelis in the face of so much pain and trauma.
On this Black Sabbath, the 7th October, we wake up because of the red alarm. We start hearing the noise of the bombing.
The terrorists sent a rocket. Saadia died in the way to the hospital.
My son fought not let the terrorists come in, and they killed him.
It's been 207 days for my loss, for losing Alma.
People lost everything. They don't even have one memory because the missiles were making a big fire.
Well, on the 7th of October, Keith and I were taken, and what I did is just try to keep alive. That's all.
What happened? How is it possible that after the Holocaust, after we built our country, how is it possible that someone, that the evil came to our gates?
I fight every day with a lot of emotion, and we have to build again our kibbutz, our community, our family.
It was difficult coming home and not knowing that I wasn't there for Keith for so many months. And he went through so many moments that he wasn't sure that he would come back alive.
In the darkest moments, we were surrounded by love, by people who reminded us that we are not alone.
The resilience is the way we live. We know that like metal, when we hit him, he becomes stronger and stronger until you cannot break him. We are this metal.
The unity of the Israel people gives me hope, actually. The way we come together, the way we refuse to be broken.
Since I came back, all I've been doing is going all over the world and talking to everybody that listens to me, trying to bring Keith and all the hostages back home.
We have to rebuild ourselves, but at the end, I think we will make it.
On this earth, there's so much worth living for, and that's true. That's true. Love and family, hope, peace, humanity. We must fight for that.
And we're going to fight. And we're not going to lose our hope. We have hope. The hope is in front of us. We can't allow ourselves to lose hope, because that's what gives the strength to go on.
We have a lot of things to do, to be brave again, to come and build whatever was lost.
But I know that from the dust of the October 7th, we will build so much joy for this country and for these people. I'm sure of that.
Thank you so much, Rachel and Brian. What an incredible performance. And we are so honored to actually have with us one of the incredible and resilient people that you just saw on the screen. Please join me in welcoming to Never Is Now, Naela Fakher Eldin.
Resilience is so important, especially in the face of so much tragedy. That's especially relevant this week. As many of you know, this is the week of Shiva for Shiri, Ariel, and Kfir Bibas. On October 7th, 2023, 4 members of the Bibas family were among the Israelis stolen by Hamas terrorists. Yarden Bibas was taken hostage, and his wife Shiri Bibas was abducted separately, along with her 2 sons, Ariel and Kfir. Ariel was just 4 years old, and he was taken. Kfir was under 9 months.
They became a symbol of national trauma and missing loved ones. And people across Israel and around the world began wearing orange, the color of Kfir and Ariel's hair, to demand their return. Last month, Yarden Bibas was released after 15 months in captivity and hoped to be reunited with his wife and children. A few days ago, Israel received their remains.
Today, Montana and I, and so many of you, are wearing orange ribbon in solidarity with the Bibas family, and yellow ribbon to remember all the remaining hostages who must be returned, every last one.
Shiva is a time to grieve for the loved ones we have lost. It's also a chance to offer comfort to each other and to come together as a community. So we're taking a moment today to hold those we've lost in our hearts and to reaffirm our support, our love, and our strength. Please join Hen and I in a moment of silence for the Bibas family and all of the souls we have lost far too soon at the hands of evil. Thank you so much.
Throughout history, there have been individuals and communities that have supported the Jewish people against threats, defended our rights, and stood up for truth and justice. The Jews community in Israel, a community that has been interwoven into the fabric of Israeli society since 1948, has exemplified this solidarity time and again. And I have to say, out of script, I'm sorry, but the Jewish community has been such an incredible part of my life. And even when I served in the army, there were Jewish soldiers with me, and I felt that their devotion and commitment, I think it's important today more than a long time, I mean, to remind ourselves that this community is such an integral part of Israel. Sorry.
No, absolutely. To go off of what he said, on all my trips to Israel, I've met many members of the Druze community, and we are so grateful to have them. Since October 7th, the impact of hate and violence has been felt far beyond the Jewish communities. And the Druze in Israel, like so many others, have also suffered losses, including the horrific murder of 12 beautiful young Druze children by a Hezbollah missile fired at a soccer field in northern Israel, and numerous young Druze men who have been killed and injured while serving in the IDF. And yet they continue to fight for peace, for coexistence, and for a shared future.
Today, we are honored to have with us Sheikh Moafaq Tarif, the spiritual leader of the Druze community in Israel.
Sheikh Tarif represents the courage and resilience of a people who have faced their own struggles, but they have never hesitated to stand with us.
Please join us in welcoming a valued partner and a friend of the ADL, Sheikh Moafaq Tarif.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. נוכחים נכבדים, גבירותיי ורבותיי, אני נרגש לעמוד כאן בפניכם, יהודים אוהבי ישראל, כנציגה של העדה הדרוזית בישראל, לספר לכם את סיפורה הקשר של העדה הדרוזית עם העם היהודי. הכנס נערך תחת הכותרת לעולם זה עכשיו, וזה מחזיר אותי לאירועי 7 לאוקטובר. עד אותו יום חשבנו כי לעולם לא יקרה טבח כזה במדינת ישראל, וכי לעולם לא ימצאו אזרחי ישראל ומדינת ישראל בסכנה ממשית, אך לצערנו זה התממש. העדה הדרוזית והעם היהודי חולקים ערכים ועקרונות משותפים משחר ההיסטוריה. החיבור נוצר עוד בתקופת יציאת מצרים, במפגש בין האב הרוחני של הדת הדרוזית, יתרו, לבין משה הנביא שועב, רבונו, והקשר נמשך עד עצם היום הזה. למי שאינו מכיר, העדה הדרוזית היא קבוצה אתנית דתית עצמאית המתמקדת ברוחניות ובקשר שבין אדם לבורא עולם. עיקר הקהילות שלנו מתגוררות במדינות המזרח התיכון, בישראל, בסוריה, בלבנון, בירדן וביתר העולם. היהודים והדרוזים חולקים כמיהה לאנושות טובה יותר, לעולם בו עמים ואנשים יחיו זה לצד זה, באהבה, בהרמוניה, בשיתוף. יש הרבה זמן המשותף. שני העמים חוו במשך אלפי שנים רדיפה, היו כאלה שלא רצו בקיומנו לערך ההיסטוריה. העדה הדרוזית בישראל כרתה ברית עם העם היהודי עת ביקש להקים את המדינה, ואף לפני כן, ומאז קרוב ל8 עשורים הולכים יחד במדינה היקרה שלנו ישראל. בנינו משרתים בצבא לצד אחיהם היהודים, יחד נושאים בנטל ההגנה על ביטחון המדינה, יחד שותפים בבניין הארץ. השותפות גבתה מחיר מאוד כבד לאורך שנות קיום המדינה ובמלחמותיה השונות. מלחמת חרבות ברזל המחישה יותר מכל את החיבור בין בני העדה שיצאו להילחם וגילו תעוזה ואומץ לא רגילים. במהלך המלחמה נפלו לנו 14 קצינים וחיילים דרוזים ועשרות נפצעו. רק לסבר לכם את האוזן, העדה הדרוזית בישראל מונה כ-150,000 תושבים. התושבים הדרוזים בצפון לא הסכימו להתפנות על אף הסכנה. טילי חזבאללה פגעו גם ביישובים הדרוזים. 15 דרוזים נהרגו ו-12 דרוזים מתוכם ילדים מלאכים שנרצחו בטבח הנוראי עת ששיחקו כדורגל במג'דל אל-שמס. זה הסיפור של העדה הדרוזית במדינת ישראל, סיפור שנכתב בדם הנופלים, אך לא נפלו לשווא, אלא למען החיים המשותפים במדינה שחפצת החיים. בנינו משולבים בחיי המדינה, באקדמיה, בתעשייה, בהייטק, בכלכלה. גם שם בנינו מצטיינים ומביאים הרבה כבוד ותרומה למדינה. מכובדיי, הקשר של העדה הדרוזית עם הליגה נגד השמצה החל לפני כ7 שנים, בעיצומה של מלחמת האזרחים בסוריה. שם חיה קהילת דרוזים גדולה המונה מאות אלפי אנשים. הגעתי לארצות הברית לגייס תמיכה בינלאומית למען הדרוזים והמיעוטים בסוריה שסבלו מרדיפה והתנכלות. באותן שנים ביצעו ארגוני קיצוניים טבח ביישובים דרוזים בסוריה וחטפו ילדים ונשים מבתיהם. מצאתי אוזן קשבת אצל הארגון ואצל ידידי ג'ונתן. פתחו בפנינו את שעריהם ואת לבבותיהם וסייעו לנו להשמיע את קולה של העדה הדרוזית. אני מוצא את עצמי גם היום פונה אליכם נוכח אי-הוודאות תחת המשטר הסורי החדש. האם הדרוזים ויתר הקבוצות, נוצרים, כורדים ואחרים, יקבלו את זכויותיהם בסוריה החדשה? האם יזכו לנהל חיי קהילה ואורח חיים בהתאם לרצונם? האם לא יהיו נתונים יותר לסכנה? חשוב כי ארצות הברית ומדינות המערב יעקבו אחר הנעשה וידאגו לקבוצות האתניות השונות. ערב הגעתי לכנס, לצערי גם הותקפו ריכוזי דרוזים בסמוך לדמשק על ידי כוחות קיצוניים שניסו לפגוע בהם. גם המצב בלבנון לוטה בערפל. על ארצות הברית מוטלת אחריות גדולה מול הנשיא והממשלה החדשה בלבנון, בכדי שיובילו את לבנון למען כל הלבנונים ללא כל הבדל ויפרקו את חזבאללה מנשקו. קהל נכבד, רואה אני את הברית בין הדרוזים ליהודים חוצה מדינות וחוצה גבולות, לא רק בתוך מדינת ישראל, אלא גם עם הקהילות היהודיות כאן בארצות הברית, בעתות משבר ובעתות גם של שלום ושגרה. אני שמח לומר לכם כי בעיצומה של המלחמה התחיל שיתוף פעולה בין ישראל בראשות המנכ"לית IDL קארול לבין העדה הדרוזית באמצעות תוכנית מנהיגות למובילים ומובילות בעדה הדרוזית. נפעל יחד לחזק את שיתוף הפעולה ולהרחיבו במיוחד בקרב הדור הצעיר. אחת המשתתפות בתוכנית הינה האימא של הילדה אלמה שנרצחה בטבח במג'דל אל-שמס, הגברת נאילה פחרדין, שמקדישה את חייה למען שלום וקירוב לבבות, והיא נמצאת כאן איתנו בעולם הזה. זה המקום להודות לג'ונתן על תמיכתו ועל ביקוריו בישראל, על היחס החם והאהוב שהעניק למשפחות הנרצחים במג'דל אל-שמס ולכל העם בישראל. ג'ונתן, בזכות אנשים כמוך העולם יהיה יותר טוב. מכובדיי, לצערי השנאה והגזענות וההשמצה מרימים את ראשם. ראינו בשנה האחרונה מעשים אנטישמיים במקומות רבים באירופה וכאן באוניברסיטאות בארצות הברית עקב המלחמה בישראל. על כן, הכנס היום הוא התשובה לכל מחוללי השנאה עלינו כולנו לעמוד חומה בצורה מול כל הגילויים הגזעניים. עלינו לספק מעטפת הגנה ולהיות הדוברים של עמים ועדות שאין להם קול. לסיום, אני קורא להשבת כל החטופים המוחזקים בידי חמאס באופן מיידי ובבת אחת. ליבי עם משפחות החטופים, לחטופים אין זמן. עולמות שלמים נעצרו, ממתינים להם פדיון שבויים שהוא ערך אנושי ויהודי שאין לו מחיר. חזרת כולם, תצביע על תחילת תהליך הריפוי בחברה הישראלית. אני מחזק אתכם בני משפחת סרן עומר נאטורה, זכרו לברכה, ומקווה כי בעקבות מאוד יזכה לכבוד המגיע לו עם חזרתו, שיקבל את ההלוויה הצבאית ובנוחת עלומים לצד גיבורי המלחמות. תמשיכו, רבותיי, תמשיכו לתמוך בישראל, תתמכו גם בעדה הדרוזית, באותה מידה תמשיכו להשמיע את הקול השפוי בכל רעבי העולם, בכדי להעלים תופעה של שנאה ודחיית האחר. תודה ג'ונתן, תודה קרול, תודה לכל ADL ולצוות מקרוב, גם בישראל. עוד נזכה כולנו לראות את תוצרי שיתוף הפעולה, שהאל יברך את ארצות הברית, שהאל יברך את ישראל, מי ייתן והאל יביא שלום על כל העמים. תודה רבה לכולם. בהצלחה. תודה. תודה לכם. תודה.
Hello, I'm Senator Jackie Rosen, and it's my honor to represent the great state of Nevada in the United States Senate.
And I'm Senator James Lankford, and it's my honor to represent the great state of Oklahoma in the United States Senate. And we'd like to thank the entire team at ADL for organizing this important conference, quite frankly, for everything that you do every day to combat anti-Semitism in communities across our nation.
You know, we've seen horrendous attacks on Jewish communities here in the U.S. and abroad, at schools and college campuses, on Jewish-owned places of business, and at synagogues and community centers. We cannot be silent. We have a responsibility to fight back, to demand action be taken to protect communities around the globe from anti-Jewish hate and bigotry. And as the co-founders and co-chairs of the Senate Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism, I can tell you this is a top priority for us.
Anti-Semitism knows no party, no ideology. Quite frankly, it knows no bounds. That's why we've been working across the aisle to take concrete action to keep people safe. Earlier this month, we proudly introduced the Bipartisan Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, along with Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina. With this legislation in place, we will make sure the Department of Education has a clear definition of anti-Semitism when determining whether an incident on campus crosses the line from free speech into unlawful or discriminatory conduct. This bipartisan bill is critical for us. We'll keep pushing to pass it as soon as possible.
And we also know that the United States must be a leader in pushing countries around the world to tackle anti-Semitism. The Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism leads our global diplomatic efforts to end Jewish hate and bigotry. We were proud to lead the effort to elevate this position to an ambassador, and we have proudly worked with special envoys and their teams under both Republican and Democratic administrations. This is why we've pushed, and why we'll continue to push for this administration to quickly nominate a qualified nominee for this position. As global rates of anti-Semitism continue to climb, we cannot afford to wait.
We also know that education is the best antidote for hate and bigotry. At a time when Holocaust distortion and denial are on the rise, we must do more to inform young people about the dangers of Holocaust denial. That's why last month we introduced the Bipartisan HEAL Act to strengthen Holocaust education at public schools and increase awareness of resources available to local communities.
Please know that we won't stop working across party lines to tackle anti-Semitism.
Together, we can all build a world where Jewish people are safe and accepted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please welcome back to the stage CEO and National Director of ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, we gather today, as we've talked about this morning, amid incredibly challenging times around the world, but particularly in the Middle East. It's been nearly 18 months since the horror of 10/7, and that cataclysmic event, along with the ensuing wave of hate and the multi-front conflict that followed, have tested us in ways we never could have imagined. And yet, as I said in my opening remarks, I believe in hope, and that even in moments of darkness, we must focus on the light ahead, and the Abraham Accords are one such beacon of light. Once almost inconceivable, this multilateral treaty has endured through turbulence and turmoil. In a region once scarred by enmity and despair, the Accords stand as a testament to the possibility of a different future, one built on partnership and hope. Signed in 2020 by President Trump, the Abraham Accords were a bold declaration that peace and prosperity could triumph over alienation and isolation. In the ensuing years, they've demonstrated that shared interests and mutual respect can tear down even the most seemingly insurmountable barriers. That's why ADL created the Abraham Award. We did so because we believe in the importance of justice and fair treatment to all, because we believe in the dignity and humanity of all people, and because we believe that it's crucial to recognize those who showed courage when it wasn't convenient, who engaged us as allies when it wasn't easy, and who've made sacrifices today in the pursuit of peace so that the next generation doesn't have to do the same in the prosecution of war. These are the heroes that we want to hold up, the stories we want to share, the examples we want to elevate. That's the essence of the Abraham Award. And so today, it's a true privilege for me to honor a leader, diplomat, and visionary who not only played a pivotal role behind the scenes in bringing the Abraham Accords to life, but also since its execution has stood out in front, reshaping the region in that spirit of hope. Today, I'm honored to present the 2025 Abraham Award to Ambassador of the United Arab Emirates to the United States, His Excellency Youssef Al Otaiba. For years, Ambassador Otaiba has been more than a representative of the United Arab Emirates. He's been a bridge builder and a tireless champion for a better future in the Middle East. His vision and dedication helped lay the groundwork for the Accords. The UAE was the first Gulf nation to formalize ties with the Jewish state. And they did so. They took that risk, driven by a vision that relies on creating regional stability based on mutual respect, economic coordination, and cultural understanding. Initiatives like the Abrahamic Family House and the Menara Center for Global Dialogue and Coexistence, where ADL is a flagship partner, they epitomize this vision of hope. I believe indeed that the Menara Center truly embodies the spirit of the Abraham Accords. Founded in 2023 with the full support of Ambassador Otaiba, The center is fostering collaboration and connections between young people across the Middle East, North Africa, and Southeast Asia, despite differences of ethnicity and faith and nationality that once kept them apart. Manara seeks to ensure that peace is more than a legal document tying together countries. It's also a moral commitment binding together communities. Youssef, your unflinching commitment to diplomacy, your resolute belief in the power of dialogue, and your unshakable leadership in cultivating new partnerships despite all the pressure have set a powerful example. You had the vision to see the future long before it was obvious, and you had the courage to embark upon this very uncertain journey without a roadmap and without a parachute. Now, I don't believe we've arrived at our destination, but the accords are already yielding extraordinary dividends and lighting a way to peace. And for that spirit of hope, all of us and future generations owe you a deep and lasting debt of gratitude. So please join me in congratulating His Excellency Youssef Al-Otaiba on his recognition as the laureate of the 2025 Abraham Award. Thank you. Should we go out to the middle?
Wow, thank you. That was quite an introduction. I'm going to try to recruit Jonathan to do all my intros from now on. My wife constantly reminds me, not everything is about you. And it's true. This award doesn't belong to me. This award belongs to the people of the UAE, because they're the ones who reflect and champion these values that are being recognized here today. And so I'm honored to accept this award on behalf of the people and the leadership of the United Arab Emirates. In a region that is too often beset with conflict and hatred, the UAE has chosen a different course. The values of coexistence and tolerance are part of our DNA. We embrace diversity as a strength. And with over 200 nationalities and countless faiths living together, the UAE is home to hundreds of mosques, more than 40 churches, as well as Hindu, Sikh, and Buddhist temples. The Abrahamic Family House, which opened in 2023, includes a mosque, a church, and a synagogue in a single site. And I'm extremely proud of the work that we are doing with ADL to advance these ideals. The Manara Center that Jonathan referred to, which is our joint program with ADL, it draws its inspiration from the word manara, which means a source of light in Arabic. And the center's work highlights the potential in the region by promoting the values of coexistence, peace, and inclusion. Initiatives like this were inspired, enabled by the Abraham Accords. The Accords were a breakthrough diplomatic achievement that I was honored to play a small role in with my good friend Jared Kushner. Jared, thank you for being here today. And without Jared, Avi Berkowitz, General Correa, we wouldn't have the Abraham Accords. Thank you. We will not be deterred as we promote these values. Instead, the commitment, the work, the goal of peace sustains us to keep going. And towards this end, the UAE joins and supports the international community in intensifying its efforts to address the root causes of this prolonged conflict. Now, more than ever, we must work together to reach a just and permanent solution to secure peace for both Palestinians and Israelis. And before I leave, I'll close with simply thanking everyone at ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, all our partners in creating the Abraham Accords, but everybody else that nobody knows about that champions these values of inclusion and coexistence. Everybody deserves recognition for this award. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and congratulations, Ambassador, and thanks to all the other incredible guests. Before we go, we want to share with you one more thing. You're seeing this first. The trailer to the upcoming October 8th, coming out on March 14th. You can see the full screening starting at 11:30 with a talkback. Take a look.
Hamas terrorists are looking for Jews to slaughter. I thought the entire globe would be in mourning. Not only was it silent, there was jubilation.
It was exhilarating, it was energizing. I wasn't seeing an ideological disagreement. I was seeing hatred.
What does it mean that the future leaders are chanting for Intifada?
What is at stake is the soul of America.